So hi everyone, thank you for joining. If people can just in terms of where they've got their name on their screen, if they can put it as their first names, because I was just hoping that as we are kind of doing this event, we leave our lanyards by the door, so to say, and we're here as professional colleagues as individuals in our own right. So if you can do that, that would be great. My name is Sonali. I here to welcome you all. As I said, I've left my lanyard by the door, but I'm not going to introduce who I am. But it's good to have all of you here. This is being organized by the Primary Care Workforce Group, as well as the Training Hub, the Nottinghamshire Alliance Training Hub, to celebrate the Black History Month for general practice for Nottingham and Nottinghamshire Integrated Care System. It's actually, we're going to call it History Months rather than a month, because it'll be wrong to relegate Black history to only 1 month in the year. And what we hope to do for hopefully the next 12 months or maybe even longer would be to actually explore and learn about each other and our history, our stories, where we've been, and more importantly, where we're going to and how we can all go together there. So for all the attendees, thank you for sparing your evening, as well as to the panelists. It's going to be relatively an informal sort of event. It's just about getting to know a bit more about each other. We're going to have some question answer session. We're also going to have some trivia and some fun facts, a quiz that is going to be there. Hopefully we'll get to the point where we can have some music as well. Oge is going to be singing some folk music for us. And in terms of people from the questions from the floor, please feel free to use Q&A within the chat function. So use the Q&A, and James is going to moderate that for us. We may be able to get 2 or 3 questions if I've not already asked everyone that. We are going to be recording this session. So if people are happy with that, then please keep your videos on. It would be good to see people. So I'm not going to take much more time with that, because we're just aware that we only have an hour, and I'm sure once we start getting into these conversations, time's just going to fly by. So handing over to Sandra to take us through the quiz, which she is going to do through the Mentimeter. Sandra, over to you.
Thank you, Sonali. Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So firstly, this quiz is just to see how much we know about Black British history, because some of the consensus that is not really taught in the mainstream part of British history. So yeah, let's see. So it's going to be on Mentimeter, which James is helping us with. So you have to, so your scoring is depending on 2 things: how quickly you answer the question, and obviously getting the question right. So remember, the quicker you answer, you get higher points as well.
Okay.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay. As we know, it originated from the United States. It's actually synonymous to the African American history. It's celebrated in February there, but around Europe and in United Kingdom, it's celebrated in October. So, but that's interesting. At least we learned something new. Okay, next question. Okay, well then I think I have to talk about this one. So yeah, her remains was actually, obviously she's from African descent. Her remains were actually found in York. And when they found her, she was actually, she had like a lot of jewelry, she had a lot of rich items on her. So I think it was just to point out the fact that there were actually very rich Black people in Britain, even before colonialism, before like the transatlantic trade. So you learned something new as well. Next question. Okay, oh yes, that's the leaderboard. Ooh, who's Jimmy? Jim is doing very well. Oh, Sonali, you're number 3. Okay, let's keep going. That's good. Okay. So it's John Blank. Obviously, this was during the Tudor times, 1500s. Apparently, he actually even asked for a pay rise from the king. That's how close they were, and he was obviously very well appreciated. Okay, next question. Okay, this is really good. Yeah, it is Queen Charlotte. She's obviously from North African descent, and they actually had 2 children together. So well done. Next. Okay, this was close, but I think that's the importance of this question, to highlight that there were people from the Caribbean even before the Windrush generation. So they actually brought people in to help fight the First World War, and they also brought them back in to fight the Second World War. So obviously, people from the African and Caribbean continent have actually lended a lot of support to Britain. Well done, Jimmy. You're still on top. Okay, so yeah, it's the 18th century, and the importance of this is to highlight that, you know, a lot of Black people don't just want to be remembered for slave trade. They also want to be remembered for the fact that their blood and their sweat is actually even gone into building like cities like Glasgow. So a lot of the riches in Glasgow was actually from the hard work from the plantation, contributed by Black people. I apologize for this one. I thought I'd make it a bit hard. It did pay off. So it is number 1. And I think they were very courageous men. And important things as well, they had allies, which I think we'll be talking about today as well. So when they decided to carry on with the boycott, they had a lot of support from like the people in Bristol as well, which is why they were successful in achieving their aim. Okay. Well done. Next. Okay, I'll just assume some people did not read the answers fully, but yeah, so that's 1 more to go. Ooh, the board is changed, I can see. Okay, how did you get to the top? That's it. So let's look at the board. Oh, okay. I guess we need to give a round of applause for Oki. Well done. Oh, wow. Wow, that wasn't expected. You really.
Well done. Okay. Thanks so much for that, Sandra. That was and I have to say that I did not know the answers, even though, or I didn't remember them. But no, I didn't know the answers. But of course, hopefully for next time, I will remember that. So I'm just going to move on to the question and answer session. And thank you for everyone to take part in that Mentimeter. I have had actually, I would say, the privilege to hear stories from many of you as to what your beginnings in life were like. But I'm sure people who are there as the attendees and other panelists would like to know as well as to what has been your beginning in life, what has been your family, your childhood been like, and your journey through this. So if I can invite first Lucy to speak about it. Lucy, would you tell us a bit more about you, about your childhood, about your family, about your journey? You're on mute, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you, Sonali. Very happy to do that. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to age myself when I tell you this, because when I thought about it, it's a bit like a social history of the 1960s and 70s. So I was born 7 months actually after Martin Luther King's speech, so in 1964, so the height of the civil rights movement. And I was born in London, and I don't know where I was actually born, but I know that I was handed into, so I was a foundling, the nattily named Kensal Rise Home for Unmarried Mothers. So that's very 1960s, isn't it? And as many of you are clinicians, I can tell you for sure that, as was true for the time, there was no neglect, I had no social issues, I had no health issues. I was just a baby that was a consequence of the baby boom in the early 60s. And what I only know from my records. So my mother was white and Welsh, she was a civil servant, and my father was Cameroonian, and he was a Cambridge PhD student who I think quite literally left my mother holding the baby. The records suggest that she may have wanted to keep me, but she couldn't, which is tremendously, I have to be careful that I don't make any judgments. Her mother told her that she couldn't come home because she was pregnant. She lost her job as a civil servant, and there is evidence from the correspondence that I read that she couldn't keep her accommodation, and that was probably just by dint of being an unmarried mother. So she wrote a letter, and again, I think it ages me, doesn't it, to the National Children's Home and Orphanage, and asked them if they would take me. And I will just give you one quote. And it says, "I feel this baby may be better fostered rather than adopted, as she does show her West African ancestry." And it concludes, "I shall be most grateful if you can help in any way, as I feel this baby has such a very difficult future ahead of her." So I'm pleased to say that I was then taken in by the National Children's Home and Orphanage. I was fostered a few times to various addresses in London, and then I found my way to a children's home on the south coast. And there the story virtually ends, actually. After 6 months there, just before I was 2, I dropped extremely lucky. And I was adopted by 2 white parents who had 3 children, and they just wanted another child, and they wanted another child to bring up. And I have to say that simple decision by my parents completely changed the course of my life. And there is an interesting irony in that my brother, who is 9 years older than me, happens to be a GP who our colleague Dr Aurora trained with. So you just think, blimey, it's amazing how life comes full circle. So that was my life, really. So I had a fantastic life from there on in. And as I say, I always say you shouldn't write people off, give people a chance. And probably the only other time that is sort of seminal for me in my upbringings, I passed my 11 plus, which again, it ages me. This is social history, isn't it? And I can remember when I started at grammar school in 1975, my form teacher said to me, "It's lovely to have you, Lucy, but you do realise you're going to have to work twice as hard as everybody to prove yourself." But what I would say is that for me, it's all worked out fine. It could have been so different, but I think it's just, I would just say we need to give everybody a chance. So that's my start in life.
Thank you for sharing that, Lucy. And wow, I think yesterday I was actually listening to King's Fund a chat with, I think, the nurse who was the first sickle cell nurse specialist, if I'm not mistaken. And I think she had some sort of similar childhood that she spoke about. But yes, thank you for sharing that very personal journey. And I'm sure just even probably every time someone asks you to talk about this, I think you almost relive those moments perhaps in some way, whatever you can remember of that childhood, those vivid memories.
It's a very long time ago now.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, can I bring you in? And I know you've had quite a different beginning to your life, isn't it, to what Lucy has had, and we'd love to hear that.
Okay, hello everyone, good evening. My name is Oge. I'm a GP in Derby. I've been in the UK now for 8 years. So for the first, should I say, 23 years of my life, I was in Nigeria. I was born in Nigeria. I was the second child out of 4 and the first girl. So in my culture, Igbo culture, they call me the Ada. So once the first girl is born, it's just like your mom's assistant. And then my mom used to call me, in quotes, my dad's second wife, as in his new, should I say, someone that he could always, if my mom were to upset him, he would use me to say, this is my, I don't have time for you. I have a second in command kind of thing. Not in a nasty way, but you know, he had a daughter. So I was called Ogechi, which means God's time. And my mom said I should have come in April, but I came on the 29th of March when my dad and my mom were preparing for a wedding, and they got into the car and my mom's water broke. And then they had to drive my mom to the maternity, and you know, I just came out there, and my mom was like, what type of person are you? You know, the doctors had given us a time for you to come, and this is when you came. And I was called Ogechi. You came at God's time. So I was brought up by my parents and my extended family. My dad's parents were very much involved in my life, as well as my mom's own parents. My grandmothers were always there to ensure that I spoke my language, which was Igbo. Each time I spoke English, my grandmother would say, speak your language, speak your language. And then I had 2 different, should I say, categories of grandmas. My mom's own grandmom was educated in Western education. She was a headmistress. My dad's mother was a farmer. So it was balancing both worlds. She was a farmer, a traditionalist. She would always, each time I went to spend time in the village with her, she wanted me to join her in the farm. And then my mother's own mom would always want me to do mathematics, English, French. So it was just balancing both worlds. And I think right from being a child, I knew that being born into a family like this, my 2 granddads were more of educationalists. They were like, which is quite popular in most African homes, you have to be a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, a this. They list it out for you. So from being quite young, they told me, well, you've got this caring nature. You would either be a lawyer because you talk too much, or you're going to be a doctor because you care. So they pushed me in the science, should I say science direction. I loved science and all the experiments. And here I am today, finished medical school in Nigeria and came to the UK 8 years ago because my husband was here doing his PhD. And that's how I came here. So, yeah.
Thank you, Oge. Yeah, I think some similarities there between your culture and Indian culture as well. And I'm sure Manik would know that where parents just tell you, yeah, all options would only become either a lawyer, an accountant, or a doctor or something, isn't it? Those are, or engineer, yes. Those were the main kind of streamlines that you had to follow. Okay, thanks for sharing that, Oge. That was really helpful, and we will come back to your Nigerian heritage as well, because I think there is so much more that I've heard from you, and I really want to try to dwell into that a little bit deeper. But moving on to you, okay. let's hear about you, because you was your beginning as well as, was it London? Is that right?
I wish. No, it wasn't. No. I mean, that's a great story, Lucy and Oge. I was born in a small town in southwestern Nigeria called Ile-Ife. It's, I mean, I would describe my early years as quite sheltered in a way. My Ile-Ife, for the Yorubas, which is my tribe, is regarded as a cradle of civilization in a way. I mean, we got taught growing up that the world began in our little town, and I mean, we had all these names. The first man was Oduduwa, who was one of my ancestors, and stuff like that. But yeah, I was born. Interestingly, the beautiful thing about Ile-Ife was that it was a university town, and it also had a big teaching hospital. So that was what pretty much brought my parents there. My mom was a nurse, and my dad was a zoology professor, and yes, I was one of two for a long time, and then became one of three. I was the only male child, and then shockingly, when I was 12, my father passed away suddenly, which changed my trajectory significantly. I mean, where I'm from, you know, when people ask your name or where you're from, it's either where you're born and then who's your father. So for me, identity-wise, that was a big loss. But I think what struck me then, though, what really changed my trajectory then was what happened just shortly before my father passed away. So it was a Sunday, and yeah, we were Baptist, and typically every Sunday we go to church. So this morning was quite strange. My mum woke myself and my sister up and said, "Come, your dad is in a lot of pain. Come pray for him." So I went in there. He was crouched, bent over, in a lot of pain. So, and then we were thinking, why don't we take him to the hospital, which is 5 minutes away? But my mom said, no. The clinicians are on strike, so there's nobody to take care of him there. So we've got to try to manage this. Now, my dad we knew he'd had a form of ulcer for a long time. So my mom said, go and buy, milk of magnesia. There's a chemist down the road. So I took the walked down, got back, gave it to him. Didn't help. So all Sunday we were there, just taking care of this man in so much pain. Monday, eventually, my mom was able to cobble together a few clinician friends who would go in and see him in the hospital. So they got him in there. Anyhow, he was found to have duodenal ulcer, and so he had to go for perforated duodenal ulcer. So he had to go for surgery. So he went in for surgery. Unfortunately, he developed septicemia after. But for my 12-year-old self, what stuck with me though was two things. Was first my father's diagnosis, and then second, the fact that, oh my days, we were 5 minutes from a teaching hospital, and my mom was a nurse, and here we were. My dad had 44, passed away. I didn't know what duodenal ulcer was, but I just kept it at the back of my mind. And interestingly, that became, even though I was raised by just my mom and myself and my sisters, that became the driving influence for almost everything I did. My determination was I was going to find out what this was, and my young mind was, I wanted to see a world where, we could access care, but also that people didn't have to die of that. It wasn't until I got to medical school I realized that, oh wow, most of duodenal ulcers are caused by Helicobacter pylori and blah blah blah. And I thought to myself, oh my days, we had amoxicillin, we had clarithromycin, we probably didn't have PPIs, but then just being able to put it all together. And yes, so from there, obviously the determination from that significant event for me was then to desire to pursue medicine. I, for some reason, found myself in the United States at 16, 17. And I spent 6 years there, interesting years, studying medicine. And in between that, my mom had moved here to work in the NHS as a nurse. And when I finished my medical degree, there was a big decision for me to make. And I decided that I was going to come and work in the NHS. At that point, there was a strong belief that a healthcare system that was equitable was the thing. I always joked to myself that I was developing my socialist tendencies then. So and yes, and interestingly, here I am in Nottingham. And just to kind of close that story, a couple of years ago, I was training as part of my GP training. I was in a QMC emergency department, and a patient walked in, bent over in a lot of pain, and it brought flashback memories of my father. And guess what I did? The first thing, I was just clerking him in. The first thing I did was request urgent bloods and then an erect chest and abdo X-ray. And guess what? He did have a perforation. He had been drinking all night and vomiting and retching. And that brought it together for me. That moment for me was quite, it was like a full circle moment where, I had chased this thing all my life. And here was I, pretty much, having lost one, then saving one, I think. But yes, that's me drawing a line from my childhood to now. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Oke, and so sorry to hear about your what was sound like a very tough, challenging time when at the age of 12 to have gone through that, but also then towards the end, almost that hope, I think, that you kind of told me as to how you said life came a full circle where you lost one and you saved one. And yes. Yeah, really thank you for sharing that. And you've now got a little one, isn't it? Yes. How old is your is it daughter, remind me, or son?
Your daughter, 18 months.
18 months old. Yes, absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks so much, Oke, for that. And Sandra, and I know we're taking long with the first question, but I really want to hear these stories, and I hope all of you want to hear them too. We have other questions that are there, but I think this is us people. We're never probably going to get another chance to really get to know so much more about each other. So staying very much with that question, Sandra, let's hear from you about what your start in life has been. Over to you, Sandra.
Thank you, Sonali. It's amazing, isn't it? We're all very different, and I think that's part of the picture we're trying to paint here. We're obviously from Black heritage or African Caribbean descent, but everyone has different stories. For me, I was born in London. My parents were abroad. They actually came abroad to study. My mom came to study photography. So I was born in North Middlesex Hospital. But obviously for my parents, they were business people back home before they came here. And it was a complete shock for them. It wasn't as open, as friendly as, like there was no, in Africa, they say you need a village to raise a child. But here, when obviously, like, especially for my mom, it was very isolating. You couldn't even leave your child with someone else. So how could you study and look after children at the same? It was just a culture shock, and it was so difficult. So I was shipped back home. So I had to go and stay with my grandma. So obviously my mom could progress with whatever she had to do. And so for me, it was obviously I had my parents abroad while I was in Nigeria. And then obviously my brother came later and he joined me in Nigeria as well. But for me, it felt like living between two places. So I knew a bit about British culture and also about the Nigerian culture as well. And my mom is from Rivers State, so I don't know if anyone knows a bit about Nigeria. So the oil producing city in Nigeria is Port Harcourt. So that's where you have all the big companies like Shell, ExxonMobil, those sort of companies there. So I grew up with my grandma, but I also grew up amongst expatriates. So basically, neighbors were all from different parts of the world. So my experience of being in Nigeria, I actually started experiencing Nigeria when I got older. When I was actually younger, my experience of being in Nigeria was almost like being in Britain, which was weird. But for me, it was an interesting point because it made me see the world differently. And like, these are people, foreigners from around the world that have come obviously solely for work. But it was interesting that they were able to integrate into society. Back then there wasn't anything like kidnapping and all the things we know about now that's going on in Nigeria. It was quite peaceful. Everyone got on, they embedded themselves in the culture. They were accepted. It was just a really nice. In fact, you didn't really, hear things about, racism and the sort of things that when I came back to England, then it became a shock for me. So it was very interesting to see from that perspective. How people lived in a different country, obviously coming from like the Western world. So I obviously went to boarding school in Nigeria, completed secondary school, came back to England when I was 16 to obviously join my family. And it was interesting, obviously, first of all, the shock of being, what it is like I don't know if anyone is growing with their grandparents, they just let you loose, you become very independent quickly, you just learn how to take over and you're so confident. I became a very confident person, I think partly because I spent time with my grandmother. Obviously, she's seen everything, she's done a lot, so it's like, just go out there, the world is your oyster. So that's the kind of mentality I had. And then came here. Obviously, it was a bit difficult, I've never really lived that long with my mom, a bit of teenager clashes and all of that. But then I went to college. Initially, I was like, because we grew up in my family grew up in Camberwell in London. And I initially went to Suffolk College, which was close to home. But then I realized actually I wanted to do medicine, partly because of my grandma passed away before I came back. She died from complications of diabetes, which is also a trigger point for wanting to do medicine. So when I came back, I went to Southern College, but then I realized actually, no, if I remain in this college, I don't think I'll get to where I want to get to. So that was it was more in a minority area, and I just felt like the standard of teaching wasn't good enough. So I moved to Meadowvale. So I went to the west of London to complete my A-levels. And it was good. It was interesting. I felt like I had a bit more support, but then also I felt like I also had, I think for me, it's just highlight something in life of, and that's something I think my grandma always tried to pass across, if you don't find a way to love a flawed person, you're teaching yourself not to be loved in a sense. For me, it was just nice getting that support from same people, but there were some people that told me you couldn't do, people say normally you can't do medicine, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. But for me, I just decided to focus on the positive. So for me, it's just highlighting the fact that we meet different people across our path. And, we haven't got control over what everyone else does, but we can decide to choose, if we want to focus on the positive things, because we know where we want to get to ultimately. But obviously it wasn't an easy journey. So I ended up at the University of Leicester Medical School. Interesting going into medical school, obviously, again, excited. I'm like, oh yeah, finally, everything I've worked for, I'm here now. I was really excited about this opportunity. But I don't know, anyone that's been to medical school, first 2-3 weeks, you start seeing the whole segregation, people from private schools, people from abroad, by probably the end of the first semester, I don't know, it just felt like, I don't know how it happened, it felt like all the Black people were together, all the Asians are accumulated together, all the white people, and I still do not know how that happened. And the funny thing is, like, that was the same thing in every single year, which I found weird because obviously I've lived among expatriates, everyone just, you went to the same schools you were, but I was just like, how did this happen that everyone is like segregated? And I don't know, again, like, I think we'll probably talk about this more. I don't know if it wasn't anyone's fault specifically. But that was the way medical school was. But then it's interesting because that carried on, obviously you're in med school for 5-6 years, and that carried on, and that I think it's just, I don't know, but maybe it's something to talk about because I still have that question. Why does this happen? How do people decide to just want to spend time with the same people? Because then I feel like you're missing out on a lot, because there's a lot to learn. The world is so big, and we have a lot to learn from each other. Anyways, I finished from Leicester Medical School, did my foundation training in East Midlands. I've been around Nottingham, Derby, Mansfield, and yeah, around this area really. And it's funny, again, I'm just going back to I think what I've tried to highlight before. So as a junior doctor, obviously had some good rotations where you felt supported, and then in some rotations, it just felt like, you know, the thing being at Mansfield is the Kingsmill Hospital, there was a lot of bullying going on. It was a structural problem. It was happening with the nurses, it was happening amongst the junior doctors. You know, people tried to complain about it. You know, it's like you complain, nothing happens, everything just dissolves. But in the end, I think there were major issues. They had to close down some wards just because of bullying. But for me, I think the main thing is highlighting that structure is very important. So you can be as positive as you want to be, but if you're in a place where things are being tolerated and the structure of the system doesn't actually work properly, then there's only so much we can achieve. So yeah, that's my life in a nutshell. And obviously, I'm a GP now in Nottingham.
Thank you, Sandra. And I think what you've really, something you said there about trying, a couple of things that you said there. One, I think in terms of how early on somehow the segregation sets in, you know, during medical school, and then, you know, how the groups set up, how that just probably perhaps grows, because then that's your alumni, that becomes your network in a way, isn't it? So that certainly you highlighted that. And then also something there about challenges. So Alicia, I'm just going to tell the other panelists, I'm going to ask you to just reflect on the stories that we have heard today. So whoever, Nicole, Hugh, Stuart, Stephen, Manik, whoever would want to come in on that. But I'm just going to bring Alicia in to say, Alicia, I mean, I know you've been around in Nottingham for quite some time, and you've worked in different parts of the system, though I know you said we're not going to be talking much about you know, just our profession as such, but what are the challenges that you've come across while, you know, through your journey, in your professional journey, and how have you overcome them?
Well, I almost feel like I haven't been on the same sort of journey as some of the other panelists, because I probably haven't had, so I grew up in London, for example, just to sort of set the context, and my father is mixed race. He's part Cuban, part Jamaican, and my mother's white British. But actually, you know, what does any of that mean? Because actually, depending on how many generations you go back, you find that there's Portuguese in there and Irish. And so I think I grew up in London with pretty naive to racism, really, because it just wasn't an issue being from London. And it was only something that I experienced gradually as I moved away from London. So visiting family in Devon and places like that, where you go to church and people would want to ask you things about, you know, what you ate or touch your hair, and just sort of starting to become aware of being a bit of an oddity to some people was something that slowly occurred to me. But probably most of my adult life I've spent in Nottingham, because I came up to university here. So I'm really nervous about this. So I was not really preparing to talk about my own story, but I came up to university here, and actually it was a really, really positive experience. I studied what I wanted to do. I felt, you know, really emancipated from myself in London, and you know, coming away from everything that I was comfortable with was something that I was really looking for. But I think it did, you know, bring me into contact with things that did sort of knock my confidence at a certain point. And it's something that I'm probably still, you know, trying to find that level of comfort with my identity that I had that when I was in London, and possibly that's associated with being a child and surrounded by family. I'm from a really big family. My dad's one of 10 children. So I'm one of more than 30 cousins. And, you know, most of my family and my close relations are in London. But I have reflected over the past few months and have shared some of these things with you, Sonali, and other colleagues through the network, and also just friends through work, just slowly finding my voice to sort of voice some of these things that I've kind of driven down. And some of the things are about stories of where you know, other people's expectations of you and other people's view of you really weigh heavily on you and almost enter the room before you do. Lots of times feeling really undermined in certain situations and not really understanding the reason why. And I'm not saying it's always associated with race, but I think partly my confidence, you know, is part of that issue as well. But one of the things I did want to raise was, one of the things that I did do well at university was I came to the top of the class in my philosophy module, and the person who was teaching it was my personal tutor. And I remember going to him one day and receiving the news of my grade, and him actually delivering that news and saying, I'm really surprised that it's you. You know, you came out top. And I just thought, why did you have to sort of pepper an achievement, you know, with that impression? And it was, I think I'm sort of getting to this point in my life where I'm reflecting on some of these things and some of these negative interactions that I've had with people and bringing them up. So I think all of this, all of these books that have been published, so the Reniero Lodge book, and reading a lot of stuff that Bernardine Evaristo has put out, and particularly Afua Hirsch, and finally realizing that my struggle with this is not actually a unique struggle, and actually some of the things that I read I identify so strongly with, and are starting to feel are legitimized, this sort of internalization of a bit of an inferiority complex. And unfortunately it's something I experience, I think, in work, but in every aspect of my life. I'm married to somebody who's white, and we're very, very happy. We've known each other for lots of years, but obviously we have, you know, interracial families, and there's lots of difficult discussions go on. And I think this probably happens in all sorts of families. But yeah, so I'm just trying to sort of bring out that the climate that we're in at the moment is very, very emotive for me. And I don't know if it is for others.
I think that's quite, and I think something you said there, Alicia, about, you know, that it's not just a unique experience. So something that I'd read in Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, I think she talks in that as to when she went to her tutor and said she wanted to, you know, take up law, isn't it? And I think they told her that, you know, no, that's not for you. And she felt it was totally being driven by the race that she was coming from, as well as gender. So both. So yes, there aren't unique experiences, and I think, but they're also so varied, and they are rich as well, certainly in lots of ways, in terms of, look at the experiences that, you know, Sandra's had, or Oke's had, you know, challenges, successes, and what people have made through it. When Lucy talks about when everyone was told you have to work twice as hard to get there, isn't it? So I don't know, Nicole, Hugh, Manik, Stuart, Stephen, anyone wants to come in with kind of reflections on what they've heard on the stories, and how would you, if you were to put your own beginnings in life, your own story, how does that sound to you if you were to kind of do a compare and contrast, perhaps? Anyone who wishes to go first?
Shall I go first? Because
yeah.
We haven't. Being on the receiving end of those stories is quite sort of breathtaking, really. I mean, there's an absolute richness to everybody's different stories, but there are elements that absolutely run through everything that people are saying about the fact that maybe, you know, we don't have that appreciation of everybody's, where people are coming from, what their experiences are, what their cultural norms would be, and that we don't spend enough time sharing that sort of conversation with each other. I think what Lucy had said around, you know, great ending to the story, but actually that kind of, I think you used the phrase luck. You know, there was some luck involved in that, and I think to a certain degree, for me, that kind of gave that stark reality of actually, sometimes, you know, you get that luck, but how are we creating that as a systematic way for everybody? Because you know, you might be in the right place at the right time, and that's great. But what happens for the 99% of people that aren't in the right place at the right time, and don't necessarily have that kind of experience or opportunity? I think, to be fair, me and Sonali, we went to an event a number of years ago, which gave a really sort of start. It was a video, and this video was an experiment in the London Underground. And what it did is it basically, someone was at the bottom of the escalator, and it basically told people, you either need to go on the escalator or you need to go on the stairs. Yeah, really simple. And actually they were filtering people based on different kind of either backgrounds, gender, etc. So the people that got on the escalator, unsurprisingly, off they went, up on this sort of escalator journey, smooth sailing, off they went into the sunset. And just the kind of stark contrast of people starting to go up the stairs and the different journey that they would have just based on the fact that they weren't given that same opportunity. So I think for me, that's something about using these stories and actually thinking about how can we kind of create some sort of fairness of elevator for everybody, but also that bit about raising awareness, because some of the elements are similar in my journey, and some of that's probably to do with being a woman rather than being of a different race, really. But it's not the same, if I'm honest, and it's just appreciating that.
Thank you, Nicole. Yes, I think just appreciating that, isn't it? It's not the same. Anyone else who'd like to come in? Hugh, are you on mute?
There you go. I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
So first of all, thanks to everybody sharing. I think, as you said, very powerful stories. And there is that. The more we talk about, the more we learn about each other, the more we break down barriers. The thing I was sort of scribbling down in my head is two things really. One is the power of education to break down some of our barriers, and actually, so education runs deep through some of these stories. The driver of our parents to get us educated, but it does break down barriers. But of course, not everybody has that opportunity. We need to be fully aware of that. And that power of family. Lucy, your story was hugely powerful. But families have a huge influence on both how we do and our direction, and many of us are very lucky. Lots of us in our society are less lucky. Some of us are very unlucky, and sort of the huge influence of families really drove through that. And actually, that's the same whatever your race. Essentially, families are hugely important, so hugely moving. But I was just struck thinking about that power of education to break down barriers. Actually, some of these stories, people have been lucky, but there are some people in our society who don't, and race plays a part in that, and that's one of the things we need to think about in terms of that structural components that this is so important about. Yes, it's learning journey, but thinking about that structural stuff. So really moving, actually, really, really powerful.
Thank you, Hugh. I saw Manik had his hand up. Thank you, Hugh, for sharing that. And education, it's drilled down, but you're right. But I think it's perhaps across, but there's some who are probably lucky to have gotten that. But what about those who are left behind? And how do we make sure that people aren't left behind? Manik?
I think the thing which I'm reflecting on, we're from different backgrounds, different cultures, different communities. I moved. I'm one of those clubbing GPs. I didn't stay in Eastham, but not that far off, 2003. But the journeys that we've described of those who have moved from different countries are very similar. Same things with the grandparents, pushing different things, option of medicine or engineering, not that different. Education comes along, family support comes along, but then comes the question of mentors. And sorry, Lucy, I am going to bring about Nigel in here, because he was not my trainer, Richard was, but Nigel was a very strong figure in the practice. And Nigel challenged me with one thing, because I wanted to be a gypsy in some ology. And Nigel said to me, why? What's wrong with general practice? GP is a good on career in itself. And yes, I am proud to say that I'm a GP, thanks to Nigel. So it brings a question of who's the mentor, who's the one who's guiding you, and is that giving you not just the guidance but a definitive challenge as well. So I still reflect on that many a times, whether I was thinking of doing some form of a gypsy job. It would have been completely a different path altogether. But yeah. I'm not going to go into all those struggles and different things, but we'll probably have a session, as Suki said, about the plumbing GPs at another time. And those who want to share the Eastham stories, I will definitely add to those.
I've got some stories as well there, Manik, about it's interesting how many of us would have started in East Ham, isn't it? Where if I saw anybody going in suit, I thought they were going for a PLAB exam, though they could have equally been going for to work. But that's what happened in East Ham, absolutely. Okay, I'm aware, conscious of the time, and yes, I've been awful at sharing because I've not covered all the questions, but I thought that was just important to hear those. And I said it was a commitment also that, you know, we tried to do this on a regular basis. But if I can just also get a couple of questions in, and James, we will see if there's anything else within the Q&A chat box as to, I think one of the things that I've been struggling with, so we've set up certainly within, or we're in the process of setting up a primary care racial equity and diversity group. And one of the things that I have struggled with, as I was talking to the others about accountability. Whose responsibility is it to solve this? Whose burden is it to carry? And I just thought if we can talk a little bit about this. And if I can, perhaps, I don't know, Stuart, do you mind if I start with you, or if anybody else wishes to jump in? It's not about a blame game. I don't want to make it, there is no them and us. But I think it'll just be helpful for us to start thinking a bit more together on this, that if we have identified a problem, what next? Where to next?
Yeah, I mean, interesting journey for me over the last month or so. I've been working with the BAME staff network in the CCG and trying to champion some of that and share some of their experiences. And I think the issue for me in situations like this is a recognition that there is a problem that we've got to deal with and tackle. And I think it was interesting just talking about the reflections of where people are probably brought up in their experiences. And I was brought up in Leicester and had quite a multicultural experience, and probably didn't recognise many of the issues that colleagues might have shared and the experiences. So for me, I think an organisation has to recognise that there's an issue to deal with, and that's part of that is awareness and sharing of stories and experiences. So I think this month serves as a great opportunity to learn, organisationally to learn and to challenge each other about what we can do differently and learning from others. But I think it's really important that we don't see this as an October activity, and that we look to other opportunities to improve our understanding of diversity and in the NHS broadly, and celebrate the contribution of diverse colleagues and their contribution to the NHS as a whole. But let's not think that, you know, what strikes me tonight is we've got some really powerful and successful individuals on the panel who've managed to succeed through a series of their own drive, you know, sometimes driving that through adversity. But I think it is that equality of opportunity. And I think what you want to be is, we want to create an organisation that gives everybody equal opportunities of success, regardless of their background or colour or beliefs. And that's what we really want, isn't it? I think we really want an organisation, whether it be in primary care, in the CCG, in the broader NHS, that allows people to be the best that they can be and want to be, and that everybody has an equal opportunity regardless of where they come from. So that would be my sense of the sorts of opportunities that we get through sharing experiences that we've had the privilege of doing tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Stuart. That's very helpful. Anyone else wanted to share any thoughts on that kind of where to next? It's open to any panelist, and I've seen some questions within the chat box. I will pick those up as well. I know Michelle said Michelle, you're not sounding idealistic. I think I completely, so Michelle Tilling had said that, you know, at the risk of sounding idealistic, it's all our responsibility. And I think it is all our responsibility. It's not an individual burden to carry, it is collective. Absolutely. So I think it is everyone's responsibility, but sometimes my concern just becomes and I think I've said that in another meeting, that when it becomes everybody's business, it becomes nobody's business, and then it gets dropped somehow. So how do we make sure that it stays very much front and center and gets addressed? Oge, you had something to say?
I think, like you said, it is everyone's responsibility. I was watching something on the BBC. Was it on the BBC today? I can't remember. Something about unconscious bias. And the particular journalist was saying, most people don't want to talk about race. Most non-Black and ethnic minorities don't want to talk about race because they are scared of saying the wrong things. And also, they are scared of sounding ignorant. And they do not want to sound like betrayers of their race. And the Nigerian lady who was on the panel said, say it, I can take it. You know, why is everyone so scared of being confrontational? Why are you scared of saying it to your mouth? You know, I come from a different culture where we're told to talk, speak your mind. And that's one thing I've always struggled with since I came to the UK. I don't think I've been able to fit in. I say things because I want to. And people are like, shh, you have to tone it down, be politically. And I'm like, but if something has to be said, let's say it and trash it out. But then people will not say anything to you. And then later on, you get some sort of feedback and you're like, but we could have trashed this out once and for all. So, and again, on my own part, I worked in Ashbourne for a bit and I believed they loved me. I loved everyone there. And I had patients who would come to me and they want to touch my hair. They would say things like, your name is funny, where are you from? And I'm like, look, when we meet in the pub, we can discuss where I'm from. Let's focus on the clinical issues here. And I had to speak to one of the partners, like, why does this happen? And they're like, well, you're the first Nigerian doctor to have worked here. Some people have never left Ashbourne in their lives. Some have never gone to anywhere in Africa. And you're the first person from an African continent to work here. Some of them have only seen posters of give 2p a month to somewhere for them to survive. So you are a living and working example of a doctor who has succeeded against the odds. You should try not to be sensitive when they say these things to you. Try not to see race in everything, which is what I try to do. I try not to see race. Even sometimes when I know that there's racism there, I try, instead of being offended, because I'm like, if I get offended, then you've won. I try to disabuse you, your mind, or enlighten you. But then I wonder, how much of enlightenment should I be doing in 2020? I feel we are human beings. I'm not the first person to have come to this country. Over years, people have been coming. We still don't live on trees. Neither do we ride lions to school. Or I can't greet my neighbor who lives in Kenya. That is in East Africa. So it works both ways. I'm trying not to be offended so that I don't flare up. But then I feel people should, maybe travel. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you for speaking from the heart, as everybody else has done. And it is, you're right. We have to listen to these stories. We have to create that space, but we also then have to make sure that nobody else goes through this. How do we have to, it's not about moving on, it's about moving forward, but it's about moving forward together, about not leaving people behind, about it's equally incumbent upon all of us to educate ourselves, to raise that awareness. Alicia said about those couple of books, which I have found very useful as well. So there's White Fragility, which I've been reading more recently, and then it's about Why I Don't Talk to White People About Racism, which is by Renée Edo-Lodge. And I think Alicia mentioned another book. But yes, there's education, there's awareness, there's data, but then what next? How will we make sure that the person standing next to me, if they are facing that microaggression, that I'm able to help them, or Nicole or Hugh or Stephen or Stuart is able to help them and call it out so that it doesn't happen. Angela had said something about bystander training, and I've attended some bystander training, which I have found quite useful. So yes, do intend to absolutely put that for everyone to be, how to call that out, how to make sure that our colleagues are not going through that. So hopefully I'll be able to do that if next month, if we can certainly bring that through. But I think maybe something for all of us to actually reflect on that powerful message, on that powerful statement that Manik said, that, where to next, how to next, certainly moving forward. So just a big thank you. Oki just has said to me he has something to share, some positive story. Okay, you wanted to come in? I'm conscious we're 12 minutes up, but I'm really sorry. So if people need to leave, please do fill up the feedback that I think on Mentimeter that James had put on. But if you need to leave, please do go ahead. And Oki, you wanted to share a positive story with me, as you just said.
Yeah, obviously that was very powerful from Manik, and I mean it's incredible. I just wanted to share something that happened to me recently at work, and it was during the pandemic. It was a patient who'd come in for a face-to-face, and we're gotten to the end of the consultation, and he asked where I was from. I think I had this question a lot, so I was quite slightly prepared. So usually what I say, I put it back. I said, "Where do you think I'm from?" I said, "No, I don't know. I don't guess." I said, "Okay, fine. I'm going to give you three options." So I said, first, am I from Jamaica? I could be from Nigeria, or am I from Kenya? So he said, "No, you're not from Jamaica because you don't have the accent." And then he said, "You're not from Nigeria because you look very nice and you've been very kind to me. And I don't think you'll be sending me emails asking for my savings." And then, so he said, "Then I think you're from Kenya." So I said, "Wow, it's a lucky day. I'm actually from Nigeria." And I said, "Well, today you've met a kind Nigerian then." And but obviously he was from a different, he was Caucasian. But what struck me from that experience was obviously first how negative of an experience that could have been for me. But second, which is my base philosophy right now, is how positive virtues of kindness, and I think this can also happen on the systemic level, where we're extolling, because essentially that's what we're being told to do with our patients, but where we institutionalize virtues that transcend a lot of this negativity. And obviously, I didn't feel that was appropriate. I didn't feel. But I asked myself, if that was my colleague who was asked that question, or how many times have I been asked that question by a colleague? It's understanding. I mean, this patient gave me the response to his question. I mean, even in the midst of a very prejudiced conclusion he was making about my origin, he was still able to identify a virtue. At least I came out of that knowing that I'd made him feel kindness, and I think that has no color, that has no accent. As Maya Angelou said, people remember not what we said to them, but how we made them feel. So I just wanted to kind of leave things with that. I don't know how that would work on a systemic level, but I just feel that positivity and genuine human virtues have to take a stand against discrimination and whatever guys and whatever either be eating or obvious. That's all I've got to say.
Thanks so much, Oke, and thank you to all of you for coming this evening. And sorry that it has run over. We didn't get a chance to hear Oge's folk music, so we will absolutely have to do this again to make sure that we do. But we also get a chance to share the stories. Just thank you so much for your openness, for your honesty, and also challenge back to make sure that we move forward. I think if we can have some feedback, that will be helpful, so that we know that we are, we must keep doing these, make sure that we keep lines of communication open, so that if we are not doing something right, you can challenge us back, and equally, bring that richness and that diverse thought and experience that we can only learn from. James, if you can just put the Mentimeter code again, so that if people can complete. Thank you. Just on time, absolutely. So if people can go on menti.com, on the feedback code is 9697901. Alicia, if you can just type the names of the books that you're done in the chat box with the authors. Some people had asked for that. If we can do that to everyone, if you can just do that in the chat box. And I'm just looking at questions. Angela's question I picked up regarding, I think, with regards to bystander training. I saw Gemma Wilkinson had written something in terms of that even if we don't have all the answers on how to next, I think that the stories that everyone has shared means that we need to keep working to find those answers. We have got a primary care, racial equity and diversity group. We've got something running on MS Teams. If people are interested, please drop me an email and I'll make sure that you are added on to the group so that we can continue to have those conversations there. We will be going out to adverts soon as well to get a clinical lead, a deputy lead, and admin backup as well. So you should be hearing soon about that. And that's all I'm going to say, unless anyone has any last things to say before we all leave. Anyone on the panel? No? Okay, brilliant. Well, have a great evening, everyone, and I will hopefully see you all soon. Stay safe. I understand Nottingham goes into Tier 3 on Thursday, so look after yourself and all your families and the patients. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.